Marlon Brando, the Hollywood heartthrob with a rebel soul, was more than just a pretty face. He was a brilliant actor, a rule breaker, and a ladies' man with a string of broken hearts behind him. This enigmatic star even turned down an Oscar, proving he was a man of his own principles. But behind the movie magic and the charm, Brando was haunted by a dark past. And years after his final curtain call, a shocking secret surfaced, a hidden child, adding another twist to his already tangled life story. Today we will tell the side of the film industry legend, Marlon Brando, you never know. Marlon Brando Jr. entered the world on April 3, 1924, in Omaha, the third child born to Marlon Brando Sr. and Dorothy Julia Pennebaker, known as Dodie. While his father worked with pesticides and chemicals, his mother was a free-spirited actress and theater enthusiast who even helped launch the career of another Hollywood legend, Henry Fonda. But life behind the scenes wasn't picture perfect. Dodie struggled with alcohol, often needing to be brought home from bars by Brando Sr. young. Marlon would later write about the pain his mother's addiction caused, revealing how it overshadowed her ability to care for him and his siblings. Brando's childhood was marked by another dark secret. At just 4 years old, he was sexually abused by his teenage governess. This traumatic experience left a lasting impact, and Brando never truly got over the girl's departure. The scars of his childhood would haunt him, influencing his later work and shaping his complex personality. Around 1930, the Brando family moved to Evanston, Illinois, for his father's job in Chicago. However, their family life was far from stable. When Marlon was just 11, his parents separated, leaving him and his sisters to live with their grandmother in sunny Santa Ana, California. 2 years later, there was a brief reunion as his parents got back together, but it didn't last long. By the next year, they moved again, this time to a farm in Libertyville, a small town north of Chicago. To earn some cash, young Marlon took a job as a doorman at the local cinema, the Liberty. Despite the family turmoil, Marlon found solace in his childhood friend, Wally Cox. Their bond was strong, lasting until Cox's tragic death. Another friend, George England, later revealed a curious tidbit about Marlon's early years. To distract his mother from drinking, he would mimic the animals on the family farm, a talent that foreshadowed his future acting skills. Despite his later fame, acting wasn't on Marlon's radar at first. It was actually his sister Jocelyn who caught the acting bug, heading off to New York to study at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. She eventually made her way to Broadway and then into film and television. Meanwhile, Marlon was causing a ruckus at school. He got held back a year, then kicked out of Libertyville High School for the daring act of riding his motorcycle through the halls. Sent to a military academy in Minnesota where his father had studied, Marlon surprisingly excelled in theater and academics, but his rebellious streak continued. In 1943, during his final year, Marlon was put on probation for disobeying a visiting Army colonel. But that didn't stop him. He escaped his room, only to be caught in town. The teachers voted to expel him, but his classmates thought it was too harsh and rallied behind him. Marlon was invited back the following year, but he decided to drop out anyway. After a summer gig as a ditch digger, courtesy of his father, Marlon tried to enlist in the Army. But a football injury from his school days left him with a bum knee, and he was deemed unfit for service. With no military career in sight, Marlon finally followed his sister's footsteps and headed to New York City. He enrolled in the American Theater Wing Professional School, where he studied under the renowned German director Erwin Piscator. Marlon Brando's early days in New York weren't exactly glamorous. He crashed on couches and even lived for a while with a friend named Roy Somlyo, who would later become a big shot on Broadway. But despite the humble beginnings, Brando was a passionate student of acting. He studied under Stella Adler, learning the techniques of the Stanislavski system, which encouraged actors to really get inside the heads of their characters. Brando had a natural talent for this. He could easily understand the feelings and motivations of the people he was playing. There's a famous story where Adler told her students to pretend they were chickens about to be bombed. Most of the class flapped around in a panic, but Brando just sat there, calmly pretending to lay an egg. When Adler asked him why, he replied, "I'm a chicken. What do I know about bombs?" He was already thinking like a true actor. Even though people often called him a method actor, Brando didn't see himself that way. He even had some harsh words for Lee Strasberg, a famous acting teacher who worked with stars like Marilyn Monroe. Brando thought Strasberg was a show-off who took credit for other people's talent. He only went to Strasberg's actor's studio on Saturdays for the fun exercises and to meet girls. Instead, Brando credited Stella Adler and Elia Kazan for teaching him everything he knew, and it worked. He was one of the first actors to bring a natural, realistic style to the movies. He would chat with the crew and other actors right up until the camera started rolling, so he could act as naturally as possible. And that's how his incredible film career began. Brando's early acting gigs were a bit of a mixed bag. He snagged 2 summer stock roles in Sayville, New York, but his unpredictable behavior got him kicked out of 1 production. Still, he managed to land a part in a local play, showcasing his unique personality on and off stage. In 1944, Brando made his Broadway debut in the bittersweet drama I Remember Mama, playing the son of the lead actress. He caught the eye of the famous directing couple Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontanne, who considered him for a role in their play, O Mistress Mine. Lunt even coached Brando for the audition, but Marlon, true to his rebellious nature, didn't even bother to read his lines properly and was promptly rejected. Despite this setback, Brando's talent shone through. His performance as a troubled veteran in Truckline Cafe may have been a commercial flop, but it earned him the title of Most Promising Young Actor from the New York Drama Critics. Offers for roles started pouring in. He played a heroic part in the political drama A Flag Is Born, and even turned down a leading role in Eugene O'Neill's The Iceman Cometh because he found the script boring. In 1945, Brando's agent recommended him for a role in The Eagle Has Two Heads, opposite the legendary Tallulah Bankhead. Bankhead, known for her dislike of method acting, wasn't initially impressed with Brando. But she recognized his potential and agreed to work with him, despite their clashing personalities. Their collaboration was a recipe for drama, with Bankhead pushing Brando's buttons and even bringing up his mother's drinking problem. The tension between the two stars reached a boiling point during a dress rehearsal, when Brando mumbled his lines, infuriating the producer. The confrontation with the producer, Wilson, turned out to be a turning point. When Wilson questioned Brando's acting choices, Brando unleashed his full intensity, delivering a powerful and passionate performance. It was a risky move, but it paid off. At the premiere, everyone was showering Brando with praise, leaving him with a simple conclusion: they don't think you can act unless you can yell. But the critics weren't as easily swayed. Many saw Brando as a work in progress, failing to make a strong impression. As the tour continued, he refined his performance and earned better reviews, but his colleagues still only glimpsed hints of the immense talent he would later display. The relationship between Brando and Bankhead went from bad to worse. Brando, growing increasingly bored with the production, started acting out on stage, doing everything he could to sabotage the show. He scratched himself, picked his nose, and basically turned into a total nuisance. By the time they reached Boston, Bankhead had reached her limit and wanted him gone. Surprisingly, getting fired from the play was one of the best things that could have happened to Brando. It opened the door for him to play the iconic role of Stanley Kowalski in Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire. Bankhead turned down the role of Blanche Dubois, but she did offer a scathing recommendation for Brando, describing him as a total pig of a man. Despite her harsh words, Brando took inspiration from them. He based his portrayal of Kowalski on a real-life boxer named Rocky Graziano. whom he studied at a local gym. Graziano later said, "The curtain went up, and on the stage is that son of a bitch from the gym, and he's playing me." Brando's talent didn't go unnoticed in Hollywood. He did a screen test for an early version of Rebel Without a Cause, but the film wouldn't be released for another 8 years, and with a completely different cast. But it wasn't long before Brando landed his first major film role. In 1950, he played a paraplegic veteran in The Men. To prepare, Brando spent a whole month in a hospital bed, immersing himself in the character's physical and emotional challenges. Critics were blown away by his performance, praising its raw emotion and realism. Ironically, the film might have almost landed Brando in the army. His portrayal of a wounded veteran was so convincing that the military changed his draft status from unfit to eligible. He even had surgery on his bad knee, but luckily, he managed to avoid serving in the Korean War. During this time, Brando also started using cue cards on set instead of memorizing his lines. Some folks thought it was weird, but Brando insisted it made his acting more natural and real. He said, "If you don't know what the words are, but you have a general idea, then you look at the cue card, and it gives the viewer the feeling that the person is really searching for what he is going to say, that he doesn't know what to say." Soon, Brando brought his famous character, Stanley Kowalski, to the big screen in the 1951 film adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire. The director and most of the cast were the same as the play, but Vivien Leigh, the actress who played Blanche Dubois, was new to the mix. At first, she and Brando didn't hit it off, but they ended up becoming friends. A funny little detail about the movie: you couldn't buy those tight t-shirts Brando wore in stores back then. So, they had to wash his regular clothes over and over and then sew them in the back to make them super snug. The movie was a huge success, just like the play. Critics loved it, and Brando's performance earned him his first Oscar nomination. Director Woody Allen even called him a living poem and said he changed the history of acting. Just a year later, Brando was nominated for another Oscar for his role in Viva Zapata, a movie about a Mexican revolutionary. His career was on fire, and he was quickly becoming one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. In Viva Zapata, Brando went all out to get into character. He secretly traveled to Mexico, to Zapata's hometown, to study the locals' speech, movements, and behavior. This dedication paid off, with critics raving about his performance and even comparing him to the legendary John Barrymore. But Brando didn't stop there. In 1953, he took on the role of Mark Antony in a film adaptation of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. His performance was so powerful that it earned him another Oscar nomination. It seemed like it was only a matter of time before he'd take home the golden statue. Off-screen, things got a bit messy. Brando learned that his mentor, Elia Kazan, had cooperated with the government and named names of suspected communists during the Red Scare. Brando was shocked and upset by this betrayal, but he still continued to work with Kazan, proving that their professional relationship was strong. In the same year, Brando starred in The Wild One, a biker movie where he rode his own motorcycle. While The Wild One made Brando a teenage idol, it didn't get a warm reception from everyone. Motorcycle companies weren't thrilled with their brand being associated with rowdy biker gangs, and critics slammed the movie for its violence. Time magazine even said it was like an adrenaline shot for viewers. But Brando was surprised by the film's impact on young people. His bad boy biker image inspired a whole generation of rebels, including future stars like James Dean and Elvis Presley. After the movie came out, sales of leather jackets and motorcycles skyrocketed. Years later, Brando reflected on the role, saying, "More than most parts I've played, I related to Johnny. There's a line in the picture where he snarls, 'Nobody tells me what to do.' That's exactly how I've felt all my life." By 1954, Brando was a full-fledged Hollywood star, surrounded by women and even dating several at once. He had a whirlwind romance with actress Rita Moreno, but things got complicated when she became pregnant. Brando insisted on an abortion, which tragically failed, and Moreno attempted suicide. Meanwhile, Brando had already fallen for another woman, Tarita Teripaya. Despite the personal drama, Brando's career continued to soar. That year marked a turning point with his role in Elia Kazan's crime drama On the Waterfront. Elia Kazan was back in the director's chair, and he really wanted Brando for the lead role. Even though Brando was still upset about Kazan's past actions, he eventually agreed to take on the part of Terry Malloy. Interestingly, Frank Sinatra almost got the role, as he grew up in Hoboken, where the movie was set. But in the end, Brando got the part and signed a contract for a cool $100,000. Kazan loved Brando's ability to understand the character's emotions, and he even let Brando improvise some scenes. Brando, always striving for authenticity, wasn't happy with a scene where his character talks with a gun in his hand for too long. He thought it was unrealistic, and Kazan agreed to change it. After filming Wrapped, Kazan couldn't stop praising Brando's natural talent and sensitivity. But Brando was surprisingly hard on himself, thinking he'd failed in the role. Luckily, the critics disagreed. They called the film powerful, exciting, and a masterpiece of cinema. It was a massive box office hit, earning $9.6 million, and Brando finally won his first Oscar for Best Actor. It was only his sixth film, and he'd already reached the pinnacle of Hollywood success. But after that, Brando's career hit a bit of a lull. He was still a big name, but critics weren't as impressed with his later films. They felt he lacked the intensity and focus of his earlier work with Kazan. In 1954, he played Napoleon in the historical drama Désirée, but he didn't put much effort into the role and later called the whole movie superficial and dismal. He especially didn't get along with the director, Henry Koster. Brando only agreed to star in Désirée because of a legal contract. He'd turned down another movie, The Egyptian, and was forced to take this one instead. Ironically, his co-star in Désirée, Gene Simmons, would later star alongside him in his first and only musical role in Guys and Dolls. The musical Guys and Dolls wasn't exactly a perfect fit for Brando. Critics weren't too impressed with his singing, describing it as far away and sometimes flat. Brando even admitted in an interview that his singing voice was pretty terrible. The truth is, the singing you heard in the movie was the result of countless takes pieced together. Brando joked that they had to sew his words together so tightly in one song that he almost choked while lip-syncing. The tension between Brando and his co-star Frank Sinatra didn't help matters. They were complete opposites. Brando needed lots of takes to get it right, while Sinatra hated repeating himself. This led to some serious clashes and sarcastic comments between the two. Sinatra even called Brando Mumbles and the world's most overrated actor. Meanwhile, Brando took on a couple of military roles. In The Tea House of the August Moon, he played a Japanese interpreter for the U.S. Army, and in Sayonara, he was a U.S. Air Force pilot who fell in love with a Japanese dancer. He went to great lengths to prepare for these roles, even starving himself to look the part in The Tea House of the August Moon. In Sayonara, Brando surprised everyone by using a Southern accent for his character, even though the director, Joshua Logan, wasn't initially on board. But Logan was so impressed with Brando's performance that he changed his mind, calling it perfection. The movie tackled the controversial topic of interracial marriage and earned 10 Oscar nominations, including another Best Actor nod for Brando. Even though he didn't win, Brando scored a sweet deal, 10% of the box office earnings, which made him a millionaire. This film marked the beginning of a decade where Brando focused on making movies with a message, hoping to make the world a better place. He even started his own production company called Pennebaker, named after his mother, who had sadly passed away in 1954. Her death hit Brando hard, and some say he never truly recovered from the loss. He put his father in charge of the company, but it seemed like a way to get back at him rather than a genuine business partnership. In 1958, Brando starred in the World War II drama The Young Lions, alongside Montgomery Clift and Dean Martin. It's a shame we never see these three heartthrobs together on screen, as their scenes were filmed separately. Brando even dyed his hair blonde and attempted a German accent for his role, but he later admitted it wasn't very convincing. Brando also made some changes to the script, wanting to show that not all Germans were evil. He believed it was important to portray them as complex individuals who could be misled, rather than simple villains. The film was a hit with audiences and critics, and Brando's star continued to rise. At the end of the 1950s, Brando starred in The Fugitive Kind with Anna Magnani and Joanne Woodward. It was based on another Tennessee Williams play, but it didn't have the same magic as A Streetcar Named Desire. In 1961, Brando decided to try his hand at directing with the Western One-Eyed Jacks. It was supposed to be based on a novel, but the adaptation was a mess. Brando kept changing the script, and the original director, Stanley Kubrick, was fired just before filming started. So Brando stepped in as director, even though he had no experience. It was a total disaster. Brando's love for multiple takes and his tendency to explore his character as an actor led to a massive budget overrun. The movie was supposed to take 3 months to film, but it dragged on for 6 months and cost over $6 million. Paramount, the studio behind the movie, eventually took control and cut a lot of Brando's scenes. Exhausted and frustrated, Brando swore he'd never direct again. From then on, he stuck to acting. Despite the mixed reviews and financial flop, One-Eyed Jacks has become a cult classic over the years, even getting mentioned in the TV show Twin Peaks and the video game Cyberpunk 2077 Thomas. But the movie's troubled production had taken its toll on Brando. He was burnt out and fed up with Hollywood. The next project, a remake of Mutiny on the Bounty, was a complete disaster. Brando was accused of sabotaging the film, and the studio lost a fortune. The Saturday Evening Post even published an article titled $6 Million Down the Drain, The Mutiny of Marlon Brando, blaming him for the mess. Despite the turmoil, Brando's life was far from over. In 1961, he signed a deal with Universal Studios for 5 films. This turned out to be a major mistake that would haunt him for years. The movies he made during this time, like The Ugly American, Bedtime Story, Morituri, The Appaloosa, A Countess from Hong Kong, and The Night of the Following Day, were all commercial flops and disappointments for Brando. The only bright spot was The Ugly American, which got some positive reviews and even earned Brando a Golden Globe nomination. He also got to work with his sister Jocelyn and his ex-girlfriend, actress Reiko Sato, whom he insisted on casting. But the biggest disappointment was A Countess from Hong Kong, directed by the legendary Charlie Chaplin. Brando had always admired Chaplin, but the experience turned out to be a nightmare. He found Chaplin's directing style to be bossy and old-fashioned. Chaplin would literally show the actors how to move their fingers. While some appreciated Chaplin's unique approach, Brando felt humiliated and wanted to quit. Chaplin had to beg him to stay. Brando later described Chaplin as a fearsomely cruel man, particularly criticizing how he treated his son Sidney, who had a small role in the film. The production was constantly delayed because of Brando's chronic lateness and even his unexpected hospitalization for appendicitis. To top it all off, both Chaplin and Brando got the flu, and Sophia Loren, their co-star, got married during filming. In the 1970s, Brando's career was in a slump. Critics were harsh, and he hadn't had a box office hit since 1958. But everything changed in 1972 with The Godfather. This movie wasn't just a hit, it was a career-saving masterpiece. The studio heads at Paramount Pictures were wary of casting Brando. They knew he was a talented actor, but he also had a reputation for being difficult to work with. He often showed up late to set, refused to cooperate with directors, and had a string of recent flops. Director Francis Ford Coppola, however, believed Brando was the perfect person to play Don Corleone, the aging patriarch of the Corleone family. Coppola fought hard to convince the studio to give Brando a chance. He even agreed to have Brando do a screen test, which was highly unusual for a star of Brando's caliber. Brando showed up for the screen test and did something unexpected. He stuffed cotton balls in his cheeks to alter his appearance and make himself look older and more jowly. The studio executives were impressed by Brando's dedication and his take on the character. Finally, they relented and agreed to cast him. The Godfather was a huge success, grossing over $245 million at the box office and becoming the highest-grossing film of 1972. Brando won his second Oscar for Best Actor, but he boycotted the ceremony and sent Sachin Littlefeather, a Native American activist, to decline the award on his behalf. Littlefeather's speech criticized Hollywood's portrayal of Native Americans, which was often stereotypical and insensitive. She also highlighted the ongoing Wounded Knee occupation, a protest against the U.S. government's treatment of Native Americans. Brando's decision to use his platform to raise awareness of these issues was a powerful moment in Academy Awards history. Brando's next film, Last Tango in Paris, released in 1972, was even more controversial than The Godfather. The film, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci, explored a volatile relationship between an American widower named Paul, played by Brando, and a young Parisian woman named Jeanne, played by Maria Schneider. The film's explicit sexual content caused a stir, and some critics accused Bertolucci of exploiting Schneider, who was just 19 years old at the time of filming. Brando himself added to the controversy by refusing to memorize his lines. Instead, he relied on cue cards placed around the set, which Bertolucci had to carefully position to avoid them showing up in the camera frame. This reportedly frustrated Bertolucci, but it also contributed to the film's raw and improvised feel. Despite the controversy, Last Tango in Paris was a box office success. However, it also damaged Brando's relationship with Bertolucci. The two men wouldn't speak to each other for 15 years after filming Wrapped. Brando later admitted that the film took an emotional toll on him, and that he regretted the way he handled his working relationship with Bertolucci. Apart from that, his personal life is also full of dramatic incidents. Brando was quite the ladies' man, and he wasn't shy about sharing his romantic adventures in his autobiography, Songs My Mother Taught Me. He even claimed to have had a long-term, on-and-off affair with none other than Marilyn Monroe. He said they met at a party where she was playing piano, unnoticed by anyone else, and that he received a phone call from her just days before her tragic death. Talk about a Hollywood secret. In the early 1950s, Brando dated a Japanese-American actress and dancer named Reiko Sato. Even though their relationship cooled down, they stayed friends for life. Reiko even divided her time between Los Angeles and Brando's private island in Tahiti later in life. There were also rumors of a romance with actress Ariane Pat Quinn, but that one remains shrouded in mystery. One woman who truly captured Brando's heart was the Mexican actress Katy Jurado. He was smitten with her after seeing her in the movie High Noon. They met while Brando was filming Viva Zapata in Mexico, and sparks flew instantly. He was drawn to her enigmatic eyes, black as hell, pointing at you like fiery arrows. Their first date turned into a passionate affair that lasted for years, reaching its peak when they worked together on One-Eyed Jacks, the film Brando directed. In 1954, he fell for actress Rita Moreno, and their romance burned bright. But things took a dark turn when Moreno became pregnant. Brando arranged for an abortion, but it went terribly wrong, leaving Moreno devastated. When Brando then fell for another woman, Tarita Teripaya, Moreno tried to take her own life by overdosing on his sleeping pills. Years later, the two would share the screen as lovers in The Night of the Following Day. but Moreno never forgot the pain Brando caused her. She accused him of emotional abuse and even claimed he once threw a chair at her after she revealed she had dated Elvis Presley. Brando was briefly engaged to a young French actress named Josanne Mariani, but that ended abruptly when another girlfriend, Anna Kashfi, announced she was pregnant. Brando quickly married Kashfi in 1957, and they had a son named Christian, but their union was short-lived, ending in divorce just a year later. In 1960, Brando tied the knot again, this time with Movita Castaneda, a Mexican-American actress who had starred in the original Mutiny on the Bounty film back in 1935. This marriage lasted longer, but it had a surprise ending. It was annulled in 1968 because Castaneda's previous marriage was still valid. They had 2 children together, Miko and Rebecca, adding to Brando's growing family. While filming Mutiny on the Bounty, Brando's heart was captured by the young French actress Tarita Terripaya, who played his love interest in the movie. They tied the knot in 1962, making her his 3rd wife. Tarita was only 20 years old, a whole 18 years younger than Brando, who was reportedly charmed by her innocence and sweet nature. Thanks to Tarita, Brando became fluent in French, even giving interviews in the language. They had 2 children together, Simon Tehotu and Tarita Cheyenne. Brando also adopted Tarita's daughter, Maimiti, and niece, Rayatua. Their marriage lasted a decade before ending in divorce in 1972, but Brando's love for Tarita and her family remained strong. But Brando's romantic adventures didn't end there. After his death, the daughter of actress Cynthia Lynn claimed that she was the result of a secret fling between her mother and Brando during the filming of Bedtime Story. And for years, Brando had a passionate but tumultuous relationship with actress Jill Banner. Even in his later years, Brando's love life was far from quiet. He had a long-term relationship with his housekeeper, Maria Cristina Ruiz, with whom he had 3 children. He also adopted Petra, the daughter of his assistant and a famous novelist. Brando's close friendship with Wally Cox was the subject of much gossip and speculation. Brando even joked, "If Wally had been a woman, I would have married him and we would have lived happily ever after." However, Cox's wives dismissed any rumors of a romantic relationship, saying their love was purely platonic. In 2018, Quincy Jones and Jennifer Lee dropped a bombshell, claiming that Brando had a sexual relationship with comedian Richard Pryor. Pryor's daughter denied these claims, but they added another layer of intrigue to Brando's already colorful life. More recently, in February 2024, actor Billy D. Williams revealed that Brando had once propositioned him at a party. Williams declined the offer, but it showed that even in his later years, Brando's charm and charisma remained undeniable. When it came time to divide up Brando's fortune, things got a bit messy. He had officially named 10 children as his heirs, but it turns out there were even more kids in the picture, some of them not exactly legitimate. You see, Brando was rumored to have fathered as many as 15 children outside of his marriages. One of these alleged children, Lisa Warmer, even showed up at his house after his death, claiming to be his daughter and wanting to mourn with her siblings. But security wouldn't let her in. Lisa's mother was Cynthia Lynn, an actress from the show Hogan's Heroes. She revealed the secret to her daughter 6 years before Brando passed away. Apparently, Brando was always too sick to meet Lisa, but she felt it was her right to be with her family. Christian's life was marred by difficult experiences, starting with his kidnapping as a child by his mother's friends. Later, in 1990, he tragically shot and killed the boyfriend of his half-sister, Cheyenne, leading to a 5-year prison sentence. These events, coupled with his father's numerous affairs and the constant media scrutiny, undoubtedly took a toll on Christian's well-being. His untimely death was a tragic reminder of the complexities and challenges faced by even the most famous families.